Ask me.
Okay. I want to take
Back
the
away from the
opportunity to thank board and the superintendent to call for this special board meeting. And so the second interim report will be submitted by the deadline, which is March 15. So your accommodation is greatly appreciated.
I'd like to move approval of the second interim report.
I'd second it.
Joyce, can I ask you a follow-up on that? That is true, right? That we have to approve, but is it not true that there's some sort of electronic submission?
Yes.
Okay.
So we don't need to go through all the
All right.
slides?
I knew that. Okay.
Or is that a?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're not going to go through the whole
No,
budget?
So I think we
I was
should
planning
present
to,
the
so-
budget in case anyone wants to watch it online. It's fairly important and has significant information at the end of the presentation and our multi-year forecast.
Yes, and I think that that should be the main part of the presentation.
And Joyce has put some slightly new slides in, I think, that kind of give us a 3-year look at some important indicators that I know she spent time on, kind of right there where you're in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying, is let's jump to
Let's
the
look at
bottom
the
line.
3-year, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let's jump to the
bad
Slide.
news.
But as you scroll through the slide, maybe we could leave every slide for 10 seconds up, just so that if anybody wants, is
The
that fine?
public,
So the public
Good
can see
thought.
the slides?
Oh, okay.
it is on the website as well, correct?
I'll count them off.
go.
I don't know the answer
10
to that.
seconds up.
Outside the staff just left who I could ask.
Is it up? Is it online right now?
I think it would be post,
It's normally
I
posted
think
though, right?
Put it up, yeah, do what you're saying, that's a great idea.
I would request it go online.
it's a large document.
Okay, so let me just give a little bit background on the difference between first and second interim report. Several major events have occurred since the first interim. The first one is governor's 2015-16 budget proposal. And the second one is a period one attendance report was submitted by the district. And the third one is CDE certified the first principal apportionment. And the fourth one is the unduplicate counts are based on the CalPATS number instead of estimate. So because of those major events, we did make some minor changes between first and second interim report. This is the agenda. The first slide's about all the funds and all our funds. And then the second one is that the second interim report assumptions. We have the ADA, we have unduplicate count, and we have the COLA number there. And also we have the target-based grant by grade spend. And mind you, those are the target. That means in 2020, we're gonna get that as our base rate.
Joyce?
But right now, it's discounted,
Joyce, I see the COLA 0.85% for this current year.
right?
What would you say the increase roughly in total compensation is in terms of a percentage, like 2 point something? 2 point something percent?
The
Between 13-14 and 14-15?
Yes, the 14-15, from 13-14 to 14-15
Yeah, how much is the increase in?
in the COLA?
No, in our costs.
Total
in total.
compensation.
So salaries, healthcare, pension, it's
Okay,
equivalent of 2 point something?
1% increase salary and benefit, statutory benefit included in 14-15 will be $1.2 million across the board in salary increase.
But it's effectively 2 point something percent that we're increasing in costs,
Right, because
even though we
in-
only got 0.85%?
Correct. Correct,
From the state? Okay,
yes.
thank you.
And those are the, I think the gap funding is $13 million, 13.9. That represents 29.15%. If we get our full 100% funding, that gap is about $48 million, but we only get 29% of it. And this chart tells about how much we receive on LCFF versus the state, federal, and local revenue. Our LCFF source is 70% of our revenue, general fund revenue. And this one is on the expenditure side. Assumption, we put in the step and COLA adjustment. We have the actual staffing. If we were to send the additional staff to the school, now they're accounted for in our second interim report. But one thing that it's an ACA, Affordable Care Act, that we did not really budget anything because I think if we can project out the cost, we can probably prevent it. So it's really the after the fact, the tracking that, so how much that will be, we don't know, but it hasn't been brought to my attention there will be a major budget issue. But I think one thing I want to mention that in 2011-12, we converted probably 70 instructional aides from hourly to monthly. So we are pretty much ahead of the game. So we did ourselves a big favor by doing that, you know.
Seeing that exposure.
Yes. This pie chart is about the expenditure side. You can see our personnel cost includes certificate salaries, classified salary, and the benefits is really 84% of our entire budget. And this is the revenue side. It's a combined general fund. We we made some changes, increased the revenue by almost $2 million, but one of the state source is a $900,000. It's for the Prop 39 entitlement for 14-15, but we haven't seen the money yet because we have not submit the energy expenditure report, and state hasn't approved that. So once we submit that report and get approved, then we can request the funding.
Who submits that? Your office?
No, not my office. It's an energy.
No, I knew the answer to that.
Yeah.
Because he's coming before us next week, I believe.
Okay, so I think once that's in, then we can see the money flow in. And on the on the local resource, we increased $800,000,
Turn it in.
and that has a couple new grants, and one of them is Microsoft voucher. We can submit the expenditure to get reimbursed by Microsoft, and then that's probably 300-something thousand. And another one is civic center permit. We only increase the revenue as we receive them. And of course, on the expenditure side, we increase the budget to match the revenue. So the previous slide, we increased $1.9 million, and here we actually only increased $1.7 million in expenditure. And one big number is $1.2 million in services, and those are for the utilities. And we have to increase $750,000 in electricity. So because right now, when we look at the number by this time compared to last year, it's not enough. So we have to increase the utility
I'm sorry,
budget.
Did you imply that the budget based on last year's use was not high enough?
Correct.
So,
Costs were higher than anticipated, is what I'm hearing.
so last year, the costs were higher?
No,
But-
this year was higher. When I compare this year's actual today with last year's same period, the last year was much lower.
Okay.
And this year was higher.
So this is a question for Mr. Anderson, another question for Mr. Anderson?
Right. We did a little research, and we found out that some of the construction project, the contractor are using our power. So we are, we are going through all the bills and trying to separate that out to see whether we can use percentage or how the difference, and then work with the contractor to get the money back.
So my question is, we have owners' representatives. It's not your fault. I mean, Nelson is not here, right? So the owners' representatives are not aware that the contractors are using our power and not hooking up their own power?
I think there are different projects, right? Some of them are renovation. It's really hard to separate out when they work on the same building. But some of them, some other projects, they're new projects. They're supposed to set up their power pole, and apparently they didn't, and it was not discovered until we reviewed that electricity
Well, I ask
cost.
because it's easier to get them to do that upfront than it is to recover costs.
Right, I agree.
Okay.
Well, and to be fair, it's probably both sides of the equation. We've had some projects that have gone better than other projects, and some that you would trust to do the work better than others in
Yeah, but
that,
this is use
in
of
the construction.
electricity. I mean,
Well, but we can agendize this. This is great that it's come up, and that we should have it at the facilities as a conversation. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, so hopefully we will recover some of the cost and then help pay for the electricity, because right now I don't know how much that will be, and since we still have 4 months to go, so I think it's safe to increase the budget to make sure we can get through the year.
gotcha.
And this is the fund balance component, combined general fund. That's probably everybody's interested
Everybody
in.
wanted to get-
You can see the first column is the first interim report, and the second column is the second interim report. So we end up pick up $54,000 in our fund balance that's undesignated. So you can see that we are barely at 3%, just a little bit over, because our 3% is $5.8 million in first interim, and the similar amount in the second interim, even though we have 6.1 or $6.2 million fund balance, but some of the components, they're not spendable because they're already spent. For instance, we already purchased the inventory, we already have warehouse stocks. Money is already spent, so you cannot spend again. And another one is that we have some impressed account with our fiscal agent to handle our liability insurance claim and such. So those cannot be spent. So if you look at the fund balance and then look at the take out the 3% reserve and take out the unspendable component, you pretty much have 63,000 left, undesignated,
For the current year.
for the current year, 14-15.
Page, that's a good question.
Page, there's a slide number, orange square. There's a 12. The number is 11.
I see it.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but it's
Page
there.
11 is what I have. 11, up at the upper left. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't even know it was there. Everybody
Ursula, I'll put that in for me. It's easy to refer to.
focusing and-
So now this is a multi-year projection assumption. We put in some very important number, and we put it in 3-year numbers so people can see the trend, or can see the number in comparison with other years. And you can see that our ADA funded ADA continue to decline. And our duplicate count, we think it's about 69%. And of course, when you calculate the LCFF funding, the state will use a 3-year moving average. But right now, I think even we average out, it's about 69%. And the cost of living adjustment for this for current year and next 2 years, you can see it's going up.
Joyce, is it true that the COLA they've announced a COLA and then changed the COLAs, right? Sometimes, so
Correct.
these aren't guaranteed COLAs.
No.
Okay, and then just going back up to the funded ADA, I'm seeing a decline of 192 students between 14-15 and 15-16, and then 299 for the following year. And that's lagging because we're declining enrollment, we're using the prior year. But just we're still projecting in our budget numbers that we're basing our budget on declining enrollment.
Correct. And if I look at the demographic study, where every year from this point on, we're going to decline around 400 a year. Not until 2019 and 20, they project only they level at 200. So from this point on, it's almost like a 400 every year.
Is it true, Joyce, that the projection even for next year, our projections are greater than 192 loss?
Well, this is the funded.
Demographic.
Right. For next year, from this year to next year, it's about 400 something a loss in our enrollment that they projected. But since this funded ADA, it's last year's a P2 number. So the reason that 15, 16, we did not see that 400 decline is because in this year we pick up some students from Celerity, and then we will see that increase in next year.
And then the other component, which we know best after the P2 final numbers, is whether our actual attendance is better and helping to offset. So our ADA doesn't have to decline exactly the same amount as enrollment if we increase our attendance rates.
Yeah, another wrinkle is if we were to lose students to the charter school, even though not new charter school, but existing charter school, instead of taking that loss in next year, we will take that loss immediately in this year. The state CDE notion is that they will not fund the same student twice. Yeah. So this alternative LCF, as you remember that in different grade span, you have a different base rate and you have a different augmentation amount. But in this alternative calculation is you throw all your revenue and divide it by your ADA. That's the average out in regardless of your grade span. So that would just give you an idea if you were to charge to some other program by ADA, this is a number you can use to kind of cost out or to calculate how much revenue they bring in. If you don't want to go into the detail of grade span. And then the gap funding, this year 29.15%, and actually in first interim report it was 29.56. So we actually from first interim to second interim we lost the 0.41%. That equates about $200,000. So even from first interim to second interim, we can still lose money. So it can be very volatile as you go through the year.
Much more than revenue limit. Revenue limit, this is a whole new ballgame.
Right, but before revenue limit, they also play the deficit, COLA and deficit. So anyway, so next year we will pick up more, and then the third year, the 16, 17, it will go down. But at this point, actually, it was better than the first interim report projection. And as you can see, that those are mandate contribution to the employees' pension. So STRS, you can see this year is 8.88%, next year is 10.73%, and the year after is 12.58%. And same with the PERS. So the state is trying to get the employer to contribute 19% by the end of 2020. And this is not something that you can, you have to, this is a mandate, so you really have to just budget. And there's no, it's not negotiable. So those are the additional costs that we will pick up in out years. Okay, this is the 15-16 multi-year projection highlights, because we are getting so close to adopt the 15-16 budget. So I think it's important to outline what's in our second interim report, what are assumptions for 15-16. And the first one is 180 per ADA discretionary funds are included, and total of $2.9 million. The state kind of packaged it as a common core and this mandate cost reimbursement. They throw a couple items in there, but basically this is unrestricted, even though they recommend to spend on certain things, but its bottom line is unrestricted. And the total of 11.1 certificate FTE was projected for 2015-16. And I think as we get closer to June, we will finalize the number and putting the and have the line item personnel cost for each program. But right now, we just do a very high level projection. The number 3 bullet is very important for people to take notice that there is a $5 million that in the budget 15-16 that we have to spend on LCAP, because for the unduplicate count of pupils from 14-15 to 15-16 increased by $5.8 million. And those are supposed to be spent on the unduplicate count students. So we, even though it's not specified, but we really have to put those dollars in to make sure that we will meet the LCFF spending requirement.
So Joyce, on that point, you are working with Dr. Abrahamson
Right.
on assignment of costs, assigning costs?
Right. I think she is. She has meetings and to putting the priority list to see what kind of program we're going to implement to meet this requirement.
And the previous year, so between 12, 13, and 13, 14, wasn't it even a higher number?
With 13, 14, it was $10.4 million, but now it's going to be over $16 million that we have to spend on the
Total.
in
So
total.
it's 5 increase, okay.
Right.
So you have to show about $16 million
Correct.
in spending on
Correct.
unduplicated.
Right. And
Principally for the benefit of.
yeah, and also I think people should probably take notice that this is, even though it's a compliance issue, nobody has gone through the audit yet, because this is the first time. And we don't know what kind of audit guidelines the controller's office will give to the auditors in their annual audit to review, how we spend those money And we don't know
For
what
four-
kind,
So for
14,
For the
15.
current year?
for current year. So,
So we could have an audit that is presented to us in the fall that says we didn't do such and such the way.
we are out of compliance in this LCFF, spending requirement.
And we would already be in the next school year.
Right. And hopefully, the state will give us some grace period, because this is everybody's first time to go through this kind of audit.
So they
We
would-
really don't know what to expect.
But they would expect you to align within a certain time period with their guidelines.
LCAP, yes. Your spending, and they will probably get your LCAP and then ask us, you say you're gonna spend on this, show me where the expenditure is. Yes, Ms. Kenny?
And I don't know if the county's going to be looking, there's the auditors who are going to be looking at it. The county will get our new LCAP that will have an annual update saying what we did spend money on in 14, 15, and the county has to approve our LCAP before they can approve our budget. They have to do it in that order. So the county may or may not be another set of eyes looking at that requirement. And then thirdly, stakeholders are looking at it. Stakeholders are saying, how are we
Hold
making
us
sure that these
accountable,
different
right.
student groups are getting their needs met? So it's kind of three sets of eyes, if you will.
Yeah,
And they approved our LCAP
Correct.
last time. But that's what I'm referring to. We didn't have objections. You probably talked to other people in other districts. So LA Unified didn't get approved at first because they weren't showing enough, or you know why they were not?
no, I
Oh,
do
well,
not.
let's turn to Dr. Berg.
It wasn't my department.
Anyway, I'm sure you're aware of, in the general budget
Yes, I heard
officer
about it,
community.
but I don't know the details.
Maybe Meg does. I don't know, we'll have to ask Meg.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you're welcome. So the new charter school impact is budgeted. No new charter school fiscal impact is estimated. But that's not the only thing that will reduce our revenue, because you may still have the students going to the existing charter school. So we just don't know at this time. But at least we know that there will be no new charter school operating in 2015-16.
I just asked him for an update on the one that just decided to open a year or so ago. We haven't had an update in a while on scale. The one that we sued.
Oh, that one. Yeah, I can get more information. Maybe I'll.
We have counsel, I just don't know where it's at. Other people have sued him too, other districts. So. The judge, I think, he didn't at first say what we wanted him to say. I think he gave him more time or something.
And the last bullet, I think, is it's very important, that no settlement costs were budgeted. So, but we are going through negotiation with all the employee groups. So right now we don't know what the settlement cost will be.
I think one of the assumptions that's in the details of the budget but may not be on a slide is our assumption of an increase of health and welfare of 10% for next year.
Right.
So that's there, but not anything above and beyond that.
Right. That's, I should probably say no new settlement cost. Those are the settlement costs from previous negotiation.
But that's an estimate, right?
Right. Because we are still waiting for the new rates.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we heard that.
Okay.
Hey,
So-
we got to that page.
Yeah.
Everyone
It still took me a while. But anyway, I think now you can see in 3 years, 3 columns. They have, first column is our second interim report. The next one is a 15-16 projection and then 16-17 projection. As you may recall, the first interim, we project $3.6 million that in the red in the second column, the 15-16. But now with the increase the gap funding, it looks like we should be okay in 15-16, but we just pushed that to 16-17. We still need to make that $3.5 million reduction in order to have the 3% reserve.
Last bit, you want to go to the next?
Yes. So with all this, I hope I have helped board determine whether you're going to accept the administration's recommendation to have a positive certification. If yes, I think it's important for us to take note that the condition to have that positive certification, we hope the multi-year projection assumptions are on target or at least in line with what we put into the budget. And I think it's also important that the district takes action to reduce deficit spending in 16-17. It's a $3.5 million that we need to cut. And no additional ADA loss to charter school, or at least it's a minimum. So that concludes the second interim. Thank you for your time. Any questions? Anybody? Okay.
Comments too, before we move and approve?
So I just want to reiterate, there were no dollars for employee raises in these numbers. And kind of as a follow-up to that, looking at the multi-year, we saw that as of second interim, we have about 60,000 over our 3% reserve for this year. But when you look at next year's multi-year, so it doesn't have a very big, we're not deficit spending a whole lot, but again, we're looking at about $20,000 over our excess reserves. And it felt like that was really cutting it close, and then I didn't remember having seen something like that. So I went back a couple years, and in 13-14, we had about $500,000 over our reserves. At this point, when we were looking out at the the next year for budget purposes. But in 12-13, we had $1 million when we were looking forward a year. So we are really cutting so close to just being right at our excess reserves. What I did want to highlight, though, on 16-17, on the multi-year, I think we all remember that there was about 3.4 million necessary reductions when we last looked at these numbers. What's changed is there's 3 million additional revenues in that 16-17 year, and then there's still 3.5 needed in reductions. So if we hadn't gotten that extra increase, which was a change in a percentage of gap funding, we'd be looking at cutting 6.5 there. So I just don't want everyone to think it was kind of status quo and nothing changed. We got a whole lot more revenue and we still have to cut the same amount. So that's kind of a big thing. And I mean, my last point is, we've often talked about, do we want to not cut in 1 year and then kind of go off that cliff where we have a bigger number, or do we want to spread that pain across 2 years knowing that's where we have to end up? And at this point, we are kind of looking at that sharp drop and hoping that that gap percentage doesn't change again, which, it's already changed once or twice and it could change again, but.
So you're saying that in 16-17, I think if I heard you right, the gap funding since first interim got a little bit better?
It went from 11% to 23 something.
Okay,
So for us, it went up by $3 million.
okay. Joyce, so can you comment on that, please? My question is, maybe the answer's too long, but what she's saying, if that hadn't have happened, right? would be
Right.
looking at 6.5.
Correct. Okay, what Ms. Kenny said about is in the first interim report, we project a different number for the gap funding in 15, 16, and 16, 17. At that time, we project out a budget reduction of 3.6 or $3.6 million. But now, in 15, 16, we got a higher percentage of gap funding. So that pretty much takes care of 15, 16. But in 16, 17, we also got a higher percentage of gap funding. But now we still have to cut $3.5 million in 16, 17. In other words, based on this current projection, we got more revenue both in 15, 16 and in 16, 17. In both years, we got more funding, gap funding, but we still end up having to cut 3.6.
So what happened was, no, I get it. So let's say that hadn't occurred, right?
Right,
First interim, you were projecting 3.6 million
in 15,
for
16.
for this coming year.
Right,
And if you wouldn't have, let's just say off the top, if we wouldn't have done that, right? Let's say we wouldn't have done that, just hypothetically, then that would roll over to 16, 17, that need, and there would also be increased costs just naturally in the system,
right,
right?
right.
So that would be, 7 million or something, right, or more. And so we're saying the governor said something positive, and so the 15, 16 obligation was met, so to speak,
Right,
and it also reduced that 16, 17 in half.
right.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
I think it's,
roughly speaking.
yeah, in May revision, May revise, we will get another set of numbers, and we hope it will be very close to this, or, better, or at least close to this, so we can proceed with our plan for 15, 16.
I'm sorry, the last point I wanted to make is, so I think when Dr. Papalardo showed us the numbers right after the governor's budget, he did not purposely, well, I don't know if purposely or not, but he did not include that 2.9 that was supposed to be targeted to Common Core, which
Correct.
I was glad of at the time because I was hoping we could definitely target it for one-time Common Core expenses, or even try and make it last for 2 or 3 years and use it still as one-time money, but, one-time money that we would use over multiple years knowing it was going away. It is now just included in the budget, which is part of why, even with increased revenue, we still have to make some cuts in 16, 17, because now we acted as though it was ongoing revenue when it's one-time revenue. So I'm concerned, because we know we do have Common Core expenses. I'm not sure where we are with technology and wanting to add technology and finding funding for that. And not a clue what we're going to do about instructional materials if we have to do a new adoption. So we're getting one-time money, and I wish we were kind of socking it away for some one-time expenses rather than just kind of rolling it into the ongoing budget.
So she's referring to that first
First bullet,
bullet,
yes.
yeah.
Yet it was not in the first interim report, but this was included in second interim report for the 15, 16 assumption.
So that's roughly, it's a little bit less, right? But that's most of the 15, 16
Reduction, yes,
reductions. Okay.
yes.
I would put it a little bit differently. We got increased gap funding, which is what helped us from first interim and when we first presented on the governor's budget. When we had numbers from the governor's budget, we weren't deficit spending. And now we've added this 2.9 in, and we're still slightly deficit spending since the governor's budget. So we've had something in between first interim and second interim in terms of multi-year projections.
But also, when you have increased the gap funding, you also have increased obligation or commitment to your LCAP,
So-
to your unduplicate count pupils.
One more question. Going forward, Joyce, in long-term, there was something where you talked about budget, the way you budget positions, vacant positions and things like that, which reminded me of this issue about restricted funding, where if you have a long-term solution to not penalizing ourselves for pretending like we're going to spend all restricted funding, and so therefore having to set aside 3% of that in the, right? In
Right.
the mandated reserve, that would be great. I don't know the technicalities of that, whether you don't call it I don't know what you call it. I don't know, deferred revenue or something, or, right? But that's something,
Yeah, we
Since
can
we're so
look
close,
into,
since we're so close, going
Right,
forward. Yeah.
right. So how to show that the carryover, there might be a potential carryover, and we don't need to have the reserve
Yeah,
on those
that's
carryovers. So
silly.
that's basically what, what we are trying to put that into the budget. But I would say it's probably a very difficult, because the state, the CDE, pretty much dictate what
Yeah.
the reporting format. So, yeah, it will be a long-term project.
Okay, Mr. Superintendent, do you want to say anything? Is there any, before the, what is it, the adopted budget in June?
The adopted budget, yes?
Any news to anticipate? Any changes in this? Like what we're talking about, whether it's going to be all for 16, 17, or some for 15, 16, or?
No, nothing new to add. I mean, obviously with this kind of news and, where we might be in 16, 17, it's troubling. We certainly don't want to operate, by being right at the 3% reserve. I think that's risky. And so the good thing is that we've already begun our planning for next school year as far as, looking for cuts that we could possibly make without really destroying our programs. We're getting a head start here on making sure that we get to a place where we're in good fiscal shape.
But
So-
are those ongoing budgetary discussions, my question is, are they, or have they already produced savings that are already in the budget for
Not-
next year, like legal or other things that we were talking about before the governor announced this funding? We had a list of,
Right, not yet.
Consultants,
That's
legal-
not in the budget,
Okay.
but it
So
will
I'm
benefit
being
us once we
hopeful here.
implement. Yeah, once we implement, the cuts, then we'll be in better
Yep.
shape. But
But
we are
what-
working on that.
but there's a budget person here, right? So,
Yes.
I mean, if you think we can save X or Y, can't we put that in the adopted budget? That's what I'm arguing for.
Will that be a
It's-
question for?
No,
for
it's
Joyce?
not. She'll do whatever you say. Okay? It's not. There's a team, right? There's a budget development team, is there
Of
not?
course, of course, of
And you
course.
gues are looking at action plans and,
Can I
Absolutely.
suggest that we
Savings?
look at very specific plans and bring them through our process of the
Yep.
finance committee and the
Right.
board, rather than trying to do anything at this juncture? I think this is.
oh no, I'm
at
not
this-
trying to do anything. I'm trying to generate some momentum here for not doing it all in 16, 17. Trying to break off half of the
Oh,
apple.
absolutely, right. And
That's all I'm saying.
right.
So we have another budget, an adopted budget, right? And I'm just asking, are we gonna try to achieve some of that 5 for 16, 17, in the adopted budget for 15, 16?
That is the plan.
Okay, that's
That
all
is
I
the
was
plan,
asking. I
right.
thought that was the plan.
That is the plan.
Okay.
I would support that.
I'm not being specific, I'm talking conceptual
Right.
here. I didn't hear that yet, so I wanted to hear that again.
Good.
Reassure me.
Okay.
I knew that there were some things on paper, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So in the June budget, Joyce, it'll be better. That's what I'm thinking. It's gonna be better. All right. Right? Think positive. We'll have some reductions. Okay.
I think there
We'll
was a-
entertain a motion.
Well, there was a motion and a second already, so.
I don't think there's any objection. There can't be, because there's 4 people here. It's impossible to have an objection. 4-0 with 3 absences. Carries. Thank you, Joyce, for entertaining our
Joyce.
questions.
Thank you, everyone.
We're adjourned at 6:30-ish.